Okay, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, ma ba'd. So inshallah tonight we will continue with Surat Al-Kahf, and today we will cover the story of Dhul Qarnain primarily. Obviously this will also go into the story of Ya'juj and Ma'juj at the same time. So this one is rather difficult in a way because whether it is Dhul Qarnain or Ya'juj and Ma'juj, these are rather obscure figures or people. So we have to go into perhaps the various opinions of who these people were, and inshallah we can pick the stronger opinion as we go. So first, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ, they ask you about Dhul Qarnain. If you remember, in the very beginning we mentioned the reason why the surah was revealed, and primarily it was a challenge to the Prophet ﷺ, right? From the people of Mecca who went and sought help from the Jews of Medina and other Jews, right? To come up with some difficult questions for the Prophet ﷺ. So this is why you see those obscure figures, whether it is the people of the cave, Ashabul Kahf, or in this case, Dhul Qarnain, right? There was also a question about Ar-Ruh, the soul, but that is not covered in the surah. So today also, just to let you know, because every time we do a slightly different method, so today inshallah I'm going to be using one of the popular books of tafsir, which is Tafsir Ibn Kathir. Right, so this is the tafsir I'm using. This is a summary of it. Actually, it's a very good copy. It is edited by Sheikh Ahmad Shakir. He was one of the great scholars of hadith like from recent times. He's from Egypt, and like I said, he lived in the last century, but he was one of the prominent scholars of hadith. And he also did tahqiq. He basically reviewed many manuscripts, and you see his footnotes in many books. So he also did what he calls Umdat al-Tafsir. So this is like a summary, but it's not very abridged. Like he basically preserved the majority of the original text, but he did a lot of checking on the correctness of the manuscripts and what have you. So this is what we call tahqiq, and it's a pretty good copy of that tafsir. Also have to mention that unfortunately some people like to take a jab at Tafsir Ibn Kathir for some reason. I don't know why they don't like it. It's one of the most accessible tafsir, and it's simple, easy to understand, and it has a very, very prominent methodology of using Quran to explain Quran, using Hadith to explain Quran. And he's also, Ibn Kathir is well known for being a historian. In fact, he has another voluminous book about history. It's called Al-Bidaya wa Nihaya, the beginning and the end. And he has other books. He was a muhaddith, a scholar of hadith, and he was also a faqih. But mostly he was known for his knowledge of history and hadith. And subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made his work, especially the tafsir, made it very popular among the Muslims. And this is a sign, just like, for example, the books of Imam al-Nawawi, like Al-Arba'un al-Nawawiyya, the 40 books of 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi, or Riyadh al-Salihin. These are books that became so common, so popular among the Muslims. That shows a sign of acceptance. It's a sign of acceptance that shows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted these works. Anyway, enough said. Let's go back to the story of Dhul Qarnain. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and they ask you about Dhul Qarnain. Again, this is coming from the challenge, right, that we mentioned earlier. They were asking the Prophet ﷺ about this figure, Dhul Qarnain. If you translate Dhul Qarnain, the name, it means the one with the two horns. The one with the two horns. But there's a long debate about what that means. Is it literal? Is it figurative? And if so, what does it mean? Ibn Kathir mentions quite a few opinions. I'll pick few. So one possible opinion is that because he was ruling over the major empires of the time, the two major empires of the time, the Romans and the Persians. So two horns here is kind of figurative. It's indicating his rule over these two major empires, the Roman Empire, or that region at least, and the Persian Empire. Another opinion is because we're going to see from the story that he went to the farthest west possible at the time and the farthest east possible. So again, it's like two horns, one going into the west and one going all the way in the east. So that's another possible meaning. Or you can take it literal and say that he had a helmet with two horns. That was one of the, common, attire, if you will, or the type of war attire that people used to wear. But also there are other, if you're interested, I can show you other, opinions why he was called Dhul Qarnain. What is more important is, who is he? Like as a historical figure, who is he? I'll mention three opinions. And obviously I'll basically denounce or reject two opinions, and I'll keep one, which I think is the stronger one. So one, opinion says he might have been Alexander the Great. Now again, the reason we say we're going to mention those names is because in the Quran here, in the surah, it says he was a great, great king. So we're not going to go after, or we're not going to pick small-time kings. It would not fit the story. Because in the Quran, right here, we're going to see, it says, إِنَّا مَكَّنَّا لَهُ فِي الْأَرْضِ. We gave him such a tremendous kingdom, and tamkeen also means that he had dominion, he had power over a large piece of land. So Ibn Kathir mentioned, أَعْطَيْنَاهُ مُلْكًا عَظِيمًا. We gave him a great, great dominion. Okay? So he had lots of power, a lot of military might. It cannot be a small-time king. So it has, if you look in the history, you have to look for these major figures in history that had large armies and domination over a great piece of land. So Alexander the Great is one possibility because we know he was a famous, military commander. He had command over at least the old world, as we say, like the whole Middle East, but also part of Europe, part of Africa, part of Asia. The problem with that opinion is that, as we're going to see from the story that is mentioned in the Quran, Dhul Qarnain seemed to be a very good person, a pious person, a righteous one, a righteous king, which is not easy to find in history. Someone who has lots of power, but at the same time who was just and who was good to people. So that's a bit problematic because we know Alexander the Great may not have been that figure. Okay. There's a second opinion that says, and this may, in my opinion, this is more like an accusation, more than an opinion. It says it might have been the Syriac Alexander, but that's a legend. It's not a historical figure. And they say, this is mostly Orientalists who say that there might have been a confusion, right? Because this is a legend, it's not a true person. The Syriac Alexander is like a Christian fiction of the true Alexander. Syriac obviously comes from the language, right? And in Arabic is Syrianiya. So it's a form of Aramaic. But it's a legend. It's not a true figure. It's not a real historical figure. But the reason there is this confusion or this possibility is because it does say in that story of in the legend that this man went into a sea or a well and it was stinky or something like that, right? But here we're gonna see in the Quran that Dhul Qarnain also walked into a well or a sea, but it doesn't say stinky, right? It says something else. But here why, and we're gonna see why there is this confusion, all right? We believe, that Dhul Qarnain was a real figure, was a historical figure. So it could not have been the Syriac Alexander. It could not have been that supposed legend. So in my opinion, the third opinion is the more correct one. Most likely it was Cyrus the Great. This is not as popular as Alexander the Great, yet he was a real historical figure. And this man was righteous. He was a good king, and he ruled over a great, piece of land. In fact, I have a book about him, and there are other books. It says The Life of Cyrus the Great, King of the World. So he also had like a lot of control. This is one of the books by Matt Waters, but it talks about this, king, and he's acknowledged also by the Jews because he freed them. Right from the Babylonian enslavement or captivity, right? So he's the one who allowed them to go back to Jerusalem after they were taken as prisoners of war, all right? So this is Cyrus the Great. And that his story kind of agrees more with the story of the Quran, because as we're going to see, Dhul Qarnain was a good person. He was a righteous man. He was, he was not out there just to kill and conquer, right? And to acquire more land. That was not, it doesn't seem that this was his intent. All right. So enough about, who that could be. We all say in the Quran, when we read the stories of the Quran, it's more important to understand the lessons and how it can apply to us. Because Quran is not a book of history, right? Though we do verify the historicity of these stories, that's not a problem, we should do that. But the focus, really the ultimate goal is to learn from the stories. All right, so what the Quran tells us about him, first, إِنَّا مَكَّنَّا لَهُ فِي الْأَرْضِ. As we mentioned, he had great dominion, a great kingdom. وَآتَيْنَاهُ مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ سَبَبًا. We've given him all types of strength. And here in some case, in one case, one opinion, it means also knowledge. Sabab is any cause. Sabab is a means to something. But here also Ibn Kathir mentioned يعني علما. He was also given a lot of the worldly knowledge. It has to do with military, with strategy, with building things, right? Military might. So all of that is included in sabab. So he was given every means to power. All right? And then he said, فَأَتْبَعَ سَبَبَهُ. And now he, أَتْبَعَ سَبَبَهُ here, it has a specific meaning. It means he took a route to something. Okay? So it seems like he had a mission, right? And he followed a specific route, a specific path. All right? Now again, in the legend, and that tells us it's not the same, in the legend it claims that this supposed man, Alexander, in the legend, that he wanted to reach the ends of the earth. Not only that, the legend claims that he wanted to see where the heavens meet the earth. It's a legend, right? So obviously this is nothing, like there's no mention of that whatsoever in the ayat here, in the Quran, right? There's no mention of that whatsoever. So it just tells us that this person wanted to pursue as far as he can go. Nothing about the heavens and earth and how they meet and all that. Obviously they don't meet, right? So what it says, حتى إذا بلغ مغرب الشمس وجدها تغرب في عين حمية. Until he reached the sunset. But here it doesn't mean any sunset. It means he reached, he went west way, like he was westward, we could say, as far as he can go on land. He went westward as far as he can go on land without the use of any ship. So as a result, he reached the farthest he can go on land. And this is why here Ibn Kathir, he said, رأى الشمس تغرب في البحر المحيط. He saw the sun set in the ocean. Al-Bahr al-Muhit in Arabic, we say muhit because it's the type of sea that engulfs, it envelops the land. So we have a word for it, we call it muhit. Muhit is something that encompasses, engulfs. So essentially, it looks like he reached like maybe Western Africa. Okay, this is the farthest you can go without going into the ocean or the sea. So most likely, he got maybe to Morocco or to maybe West Africa, and then he saw the Atlantic Sea or the Atlantic Ocean rather, and he stopped. That's a likely scenario. So here Ibn Kathir again said he saw it set. So he's talking about the sun. He saw the sun setting in the sea that is engulfing. So that is the ocean. وهذا شأن كل من انتهى إلى ساحله. And this is the case, he said, anytime you reach ashore, you're going to see the sunset in the sea. يراها كأنها, he sees it as if it is setting in the sea, not that it sets in the sea, obviously. And look what he said, this is Ibn Kathir, but he had some knowledge of astronomy. So he said, وهي لا تفارق الفلك الرابع الذي هي مثبتة فيه لا تفارقه. Back then, they had this idea that the earth was the center and the planets, or in that case, the sun also was revolving around the earth. This is nothing to do with religion or Islam. There's no mention of that. This is just scholars grabbing the knowledge that was existent at the time. So he's saying, but he's still saying something good, right? He's saying that the sun would never touch the earth because it is in its own orbit. But back then they believed that the sun was in the fourth orbit. I don't remember all of them. I think you have the earth here, and then first you have the moon as the first orbit, and maybe second was maybe Venus, and then Mars maybe, and then the sun. I don't know, I mean, something like that, right? So in that case, the sun would be in the fourth orbit, which again is not correct as we know today, because we know the sun is the center of the solar system and not the earth. But still, the point here is that Ibn Kathir is saying that obviously here it's just, what appears to be, the case, that the sun appears to be setting in the sea, but in reality it does not leave the orbit, he says, right? It stays in that orbit. So it just, like you can say, a visual thing, like visual, trick, if you like. يراها كأنها تغرب فيه. He sees it as if it is setting in the sea. All right. So what about this عين حمئة then? عين حمئة you can translate as muddy or murky or dark. Sure, I mean, if you look in the ocean, because it is big, because it is deep, so deep water obviously has a darker color, right? So this could also be referring to the ocean, the fact that it is dark because it is deep and it's wide and it's as far as you can see. Some early scholars have also mentioned that hamia could also mean something that is warm. Okay, from hamia. So there's another possible recitation, hamia, which means warm or even hot. But it seems like the more accurate meaning is that it is just like dark or murky. Again, it could refer to an active ocean, something like that, but also the fact that it is big and deep, and Allah knows best. Okay, so and it says وَوَجَدَ عِنْدَهَا قَوْمًا, and then he found some people right there. He found some people right at the coast, like the shore. قلنا يا ذا القرنين إما أن تعذب وإما أن تتخذ فيهم حسنا. We told Dhul Qarnain, this is Allah speaking to Dhul Qarnain, he said, you have two options, either you punish those people or you give them good treatment. تتخذ فيهم حسنا. You give them good treatment. And the answer of Dhul Qarnain, he said, أَمَّا مَنْ ظَلَمَ, the one who oppresses, who commits injustice, then we will punish him. So we only punish those who have committed offenses, who have committed injustice. So that shows that this king was a just king. And then, of course, he also might have a punishment with Allah later. And then he said, وَأَمَّا مَنْ آمَنَ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا, as to the one who has faith and does good actions, then he would not see anything from us except good things. So we only give him good treatment, this type of person. So also it appears that this man was like a believing person, a believing king, that he believed in God, he believed in Allah. And وَسَنَقُولُ لَهُ مِنْ أَمْرِنَا يُسْرًا, and we'll only, even when we speak to them, we're gonna be easygoing, right? And we'll only say good things. Okay. ثُمَّ أَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا, right? And then he took another path. And it seems like here now, he took the opposite path, going eastward now. حتى إذا بلغ مطلع الشمس. Now he reached a land where the sun rises. Again, it doesn't mean that he's reaching the end of the earth. There's no such a thing anyways. But he's going eastward, right? And he might have traveled as far as he could eastward. Or maybe the end of his empire, his place of domination. And then he found people, right? وجدها تطلع على قوم لم نجعل لهم من دونها سترا. Those people did not have any buildings, did not have anything to cover them or to shelter them, right? Ibn Kathir mentions ليس لهم بناء يكنهم. They don't have any kind of building or house to shelter them. Not even, he said, ولا أشجار تظلهم. Not even trees to give them shade or to protect them from the sun. وَتَسْتُرُهُمْ مِنْ حَرِّ الشَّمْسِ. So they had nothing, barren land, no buildings, nothing like that. Okay? كَذَلِكَ وَقَدْ أَحَطْنَا بِمَا لَدَيْهِ خُبْرًا. But here also the ayah says this is how we have basically surrounded, or basically here it means that we have known everything about him. All right? So we are aware of all his news, all of his affairs. We are aware of it. أَحَطْنَا بِمَا لَدَيْهِ خُبْرًا. So nothing can escape our knowledge. Okay. All right. Now the third, if you like, the third path or the third journey. Here it doesn't tell us the direction like the first two times. First it was west, second was east, and here he took another path. But obviously he was already in the east, so it might have been in that region, right? It could have been in the far east, could have been closer, right? And that is important because now we're going to talk about the location of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and there's a big debate about that as well. So what it says, حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغَ بَيْنَ السَّدَّيْنِ, until he reached the location between the two mountains. Here, Sad usually means a dam, like you build a dam. But here it is referring to a mountain. Ibn Kathir mentions, وَهُمَا جَبَلَانِ. There are two mountains, مُتَنَاوِحَانِ بَيْنَهُمَا ثُغْرًا. There are two mountains close to each other, and there is a gap or an opening between these two mountains. So these two mountains, you can imagine, they're right here, and there's an opening in between. And that's a nice place to build any kind of dam or a wall, right? So we're going to see, inshallah, how that happens. So he said, يَخْرُجُ مِنْهَا يَأْجُوجُ مَأْجُوجُ, because that opening between these two mountains is where Ya'juj and Ma'juj, you can translate them as Gog and Magog, right? This is where they're going to come from. So he said, وَجَدَ مِن دُونِهِمَا قَوْمًا لَا يَكَادُونَ يَفْقَهُونَ قَوْلًا. He found those people, and those people could barely understand any language. So that shows that these people were kind of isolated from other cultures, because usually that happens. If you're isolated from other cultures, you're not going to be able to understand the language of someone else. Okay. So those people are not Ya'juj and Ma'juj, by the way. Those are the people who are afraid or scared of or concerned about Ya'juj and Ma'juj. So they told Dhul Qarnain, they saw him as a mighty king, and with lots of army, lots of soldiers, big army, maybe a lot of potential workers, right? They said, "Oh Dhul Qarnain, we have a problem with Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Inna Ya'juj and Ma'juj mufsidun fil ard. They are so corrupt. Anywhere they go, they destroy. They, they kill, they maim, and so on. Mufsiduna fil ard. So we want you to help us build a wall, right?" Ibn Kathir here makes a note which is important, because a lot of people debate the nature of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and some people claim that these are not even humans, or maybe part human, part jinn, or something else like zombies, whatever. There's so many opinions out there. So here Ibn Kathir makes it clear that these are people from the progeny, from the descendants of Adam alayhi salam. Okay? So they are, he said, from the progeny of Adam. So they are human, just like everybody else. Just because they're corrupt, they're large in number, they might be, I don't know, they could be a little bigger in size, but they're not giants. Giants don't exist, right? It's a legend or a myth. They're not jinn, they're humans, he said. And he brings a hadith actually from Bukhari and Muslim. It's about the Day of Judgment and the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will call Adam alayhi salam. As we say, Adam is the father of the human race, right? So if Adam is the one being addressed, and there's a mention of Ya'juj and Ma'juj in this hadith, it means that these people are from the progeny of Adam alayhi salam. Okay? The hadith is long, but it just says that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asking Adam to bring the people of the hellfire, and it's a large number, right? So Adam, is scared, like so many of his progeny will be, punished. But then he said, most of them are from Ya'juj and Ma'juj. But again, it's referring to the fact that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are from the progeny of Adam alayhi salam. He also narrates a hadith from Imam Ahmad, from Samura, from the Prophet alayhi salam, in this regard. So he said, قال, that the Prophet said alayhi salam, وَلَدُ نُوحٍ ثَلَاثًا, like the descendants of Noah are three. Sam, Abu al-Arab, Sam or Sham, you could say, or Semitic, now we say Semitic people. He said the father of the Arabs. And obviously nowadays you say Semitic, people think of the Jewish people only, but no doubt the Semitic people are the Arabs and the Jewish people. Both are from the same father, Sam or Sham. In Arabic we say Sam, like Sin, Alif, Mim. And in the hadith it says Abu al-Arab, the father of the Arabs. Okay? So that's one. The second one is Ham, and in Arabic we say Ham. So Ham in Arabic, in English we say Ham, but not a ham sandwich. It's a name of a person, but it's spelled the same way. And he's the father of the Africans, he said. And the third one is Japheth. In Arabic it's Yafith. Yafith is Japheth. And he said Abu Turk. But here, so Turk doesn't mean the Turkish people only, right? But it means actually a large number of people, the Indo-European. So it encompasses all of the European people, all the white people, that is, right? And the Greek, of course, the Persians are included in that. So Japheth has a large number of people as descendants. So here, Ibn Kathir is saying that when it comes to Ya'juj and Ma'juj, they are from the progeny of Japheth, okay? So they're not Semitic and they're not from Africa. Okay. If we can take questions if you have any questions about that, but that's just a summary of at least his opinion about this, like who Ya'juj and Ma'juj are. Okay, so now about building the wall or building this dam, if you will. Basically, what happens, they offer Dhul Qarnain, they make an offer to Dhul Qarnain, like we're gonna pay you a lot of money. They said, فهل نجعل like a kharjan. Kharjan is like, even nowadays we say kharjiyya. Kharjiyya is like you get some money from your dad. Allowance, right? We say that you get an allowance. So kharj is like an allowance. Usually it's not a big sum of money. And it seems like these people may not have been that wealthy anyways. So it's not that much. But we see again Dhul Qarnain being the person who is a good person, not looking for money, not looking for wealth. He just wants to do something good for these people. He said, "Ma makanni fihi rabbi khair." What Allah gave me is enough. I'm not looking for wealth. I'm not looking for money. I'm not looking for your allowance. Rather, I just want to help you. So he said, all I need from you, فَأَعِينُونِ بِقُوَّةٍ. Give me your hands. Help me with your hands. Like you could work with my people, right? You do some labor. So that's all I want from you. I don't want money. I don't want wealth. Rather, what I have is good. The wealth I have is enough. فَأَعِينُونِ بِقُوَّةٍ. Just give me your strength. Lend me your strength. Whatever you have, whether it's your hands or any equipment you might have. And what I will do, أَجْعَلْ بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَهُمْ رَدْمًا. I will create this big wall. And then specifically, he says, like, that's how we're going to do it, basically. It's a well-engineered plan, right? He said, "Atuni zubar al-hadid." First, bring me zubar al-hadid. So zubar is like bricks of iron. Bricks of iron. So yeah, that's not easy to come up with, but this is what the requirement was. Like if you give me like stones or rocks or something like that, that's not gonna cut it. That's not gonna make it. It's easy to drill or dig in such a thing. So you need something more solid, something more, something you cannot penetrate. So he said, "Atuni zubar al-hadid." So first you start with these bricks of metal, right? And what he's gonna do, he said, "Hatta idha sawa bayna as-sadafayn." So he's gonna lay those bricks on top of each other, just like you build a wall. And it says, "Hatta idha sawa bayna as-sadafayn," until you reach the peaks of these two mountains. Sawa is like you make it even with the peaks of these two mountains. So you can imagine it's a lot of work, a lot of labor, but also a lot of material. He said, on top of that, what we're gonna do, then what you're gonna do is you're gonna build this big fire. So you have to blow into the fire to build it. Until they made like a huge fire. And then he said, قال أتوني أفرغ عليه قطرة, because they were gonna make this melted copper, right? And then they took that melted copper and they dumped it on the bricks, right? So that made it very, very solid, right? So on top of those metal bricks, they poured the melted copper. And of course, when it cools down, it's gonna solidify. It's gonna make it stick together much better. Nowadays, if you build a wall, obviously you get these bricks, and then you cement between them. You put the cement between them to make them stick together. Also use a particular pattern to make it also like intermingle. So you know they are they strengthen each other, and then you put the cement as well. Here, instead of the cement, you have the melted copper. Okay, so they did that, and then as a result, it says فَمَا اسْطَاعُوا أَنْ يَظْهَرُوهُ وَمَا اسْتَطَاعُوا لَهُ نَقْبًا. Right? So two things happened. Because of this wall, and how strong and how high, they couldn't climb on it. Also, there's another benefit if you have melted copper, so it's very slippery, you can't really climb. So they could not, it says, they could not climb over it. Yadhar is to go on top of something. Dhahara is to be on top, like dhahr is also the back, right? So anything when you go on top of something, or you are able to see something, that is dhuhur. Dhuhur is appearance as well. So فَمَا اسْطَاعُوا أَنْ يَظْهَرُوهُ means they could not get on top of it. They could not climb over it. وَمَا اسْتَطَاعُوا لَهُ نَقْبًا, and they could not dig or drill or punch any hole in it, right? It's so thick and solid. In fact, Ibn Kathir mentions an interesting, you could say, anecdote, or a linguistic note. He said, you notice in this ayah, he said, فَمَا اسْطَاعُوا أَنْ يَظْهَرُوهُ وَمَا اسْتَطَاعُوا. So there's a slightly different. Sta'a is to be able to do something. But he said because climbing is a little easier than digging or drilling in the wall. So sta'a is to be able. Istata'a, it requires more effort. But they couldn't do either. So the point is, at the end, they couldn't do either. They couldn't climb, and they could not drill in it. Now, this is interesting because we see also a hadith. So this is way back in the time of Dhul Qarnain. If we take the opinion that it was Cyrus, the king, this was before Isa, before Jesus. So this is before Christ, as we say, because if you use the Gregorian calendar, you have before Christ, BC, and after Christ, right? So in that case, this king we talked about, King Cyrus, was before Christ. So it was a long time ago, way before Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. At least between Isa and Muhammad, peace be upon them, there was at least 600 years. And if this king lived like maybe 300 years before Christ, now we're talking about 900 years, almost 1,000 years between this king and when he built the wall and when the Prophet told us this hadith that I'm gonna tell you right now. Okay? So in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, and this is also narrated by Imam Ahmad from the wife of the Prophet ﷺ. She said, so she's narrating from the Prophet ﷺ. She said, استيقظ النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من نومه. One time the Prophet ﷺ woke up from his sleep, and you could see that his face was red. وهو يقول, and he was saying, لا إله إلا الله. We all know what that means, right? Don't have to translate that. He said, وَيْلٌ لِلْعَرَبْ مِنْ شَرٍ قَدْ اقْتَرَبَ. Woe to the Arabs from an evil that is coming near. It's going to happen in the future. But it's not too far away. He said, فُتِحَ الْيَوْمَ مِنْ رَدْمِ يَأْجُوجَ وَمَأْجُوجَ مِثْلُ هَذَا. He said, today, from this wall of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, so that he's referring to the wall that Dhul Qarnain built, right? He's referring to the wall that is mentioned in, Surat Kahf, right? So that wall that we just talked about with the metal bricks and the melted copper, he said there was a hole this big, because he actually showed with his hand. وَحَلَّق, it says. حَلَّق is to make a halqa, like a ring. So he said this big a hole was, you could say drilled or dug, whatever, in the wall. So this much was opened in the wall of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, he said. So even that much is a lot because that's the beginning. Once you start, you can't stop it, right? So yes, the ayah says that they couldn't do it at the time when the wall was built. They couldn't, punch a hole in it. They couldn't climb. But obviously 900 years later or so, let's assume that was the time, 800, 900 years, enough time to do something like this. So he said that this much was opened from the wall. فتح اليوم من ردم يأجوج ومأجوج مثل هذا. And then the wife asks, قلت يا رسول الله أنهلك وفينا الصالحون? Do we perish while we have righteous people amongst us? And he said, نعم إذا كثر الخبث. He said, yes, it can happen if evil becomes so dominant. So even if there are some righteous people, if the evil becomes so dominant, then this could happen. And this is a hadith in Bukhari. Bukhari and Muslim actually, it seems. Okay. Let's go back to the ayah to finish. The next ayah, we see Dhul Qarnain speaking after the building of the wall. He said, قال هذا رحمة من ربي. He said, this is a mercy from my Lord. All right? Because, it took a lot of effort, it took a lot of, work. So no doubt it couldn't happen without the mercy, without the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he said then, فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي, when the promise of my Lord comes, this wall will fall apart. Okay, جَعَلَهُ دَكَّةً or دَكَّاءَ, it means it will crumble, it will fall apart. And indeed, the promise of my Lord will come true. So this will happen. So even, Dhul Qarnain knew that it was going to happen in the future. That this wall will cease to exist. It'll somehow, fall apart. It will crumble and it will not exist forever. Okay. Question is, when that will happen? When is the time? When is it going to happen? When this wall will come apart? Because that can, create lots of different opinions or even confusion, right? So let me give you an example. A lot of people might ask, especially young people, like if you go today, we survey the earth, we use whatever, Google Earth, whatever, technology we have, we don't find any wall. We don't find, if it's a wall this big that is high enough as a mountain or two mountains, where is it? How come we don't see it? And some people say, well, it might have been the wall of China, right? But the wall of China is not like this wall between, it's not at least visible that it is between two mountains like that. And some even, I've read some that say these people could be living under earth somewhere, but again, where are they? You can't just claim something and not, prove it or be able to prove it or provide evidence for it. My understanding, at least, is that this wall could have crumbled already. It doesn't, here in the ayat, it doesn't tell us that it has to be right before the... See, some people assume that this has to happen right before the Day of Judgment. But that's not necessarily the case. Because here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي, the promise of my Lord. You don't have to say that this promise is the Day of Judgment. It's only the promise that this wall will crumble, right? So it's a promise that this wall will not exist forever, okay? That there'll be some time that it will fall apart, and that will come true. But it doesn't say to us, doesn't tell us when that's going to happen. And then, of course, we know that before the Day of Judgment, one of the big signs of the Day of Judgment, that Ya'juj and Ma'juj will come again. So they could be dispersed now and they could gather again before the Day of Judgment. So personally, I don't see a problem with that scenario, because that would, reconcile between all the, ayat, all the verses, the hadith, and also reality, because we cannot ignore reality. You cannot say, well, it is but here, but no one can see it. Where is it? Right? Or that they're under somewhere, Allahu Alam where, underground. But even that, people would have discovered by now. So that's at least my understanding. And again, if you have any questions or comments, all welcome, and we can discuss it. And last but not least, the last ayah here, وَتَرَكْنَا بَعْضَهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَمُوجُ فِي بَعْضٍ. We let them, it says yamuj, so it's like from mawj, which is like the sea current. You see how the waves, they bump into each other, right? So people will do that as well. Some people, some scholars rather, they say that this is regarding Ya'juj and Ma'juj. They're going to be so much in number before the Day of Judgment, and they're going to be like a sea of people. And some others say that this is not referring to Ya'juj and Ma'juj anymore. Now it's talking about the Day of Judgment and how everybody on the Day of Judgment will be like a big sea of people, like a huge number of people, like huge waves going into each other or bumping into each other. In fact, Ibn Kathir himself mentioned that as an opinion. He said, وَقَالَ أَخَرُونَ. Some other scholars have said that this is now referring, so this is ayah number 99. This one is now referring to people at large, not just Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and the fact that on the Day of Judgment, they will mix like that. So all the nations are mixing together. تَرَكْنَا بَعْضَهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَمُوجُ فِي بَعْضٍ. So all these nations will mix with each other. And even he said, even the jinn will also be part of that mix, right? Because it says وَنُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ فَجَمَعْنَاهُمْ جَمْعًا. So definitely now, this ayah 99, ayah number 99, is talking about the Day of Judgment, right? Because it says a trumpet will be blown and they all will be gathered. So this is talking about everybody being gathered, not just Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Okay, so let me stop here. We're actually almost out of time, and sure we have some questions.
Related to the wall, on the possibility that it has already happened, the ayah mentions the when, or something like that, when the promise of Allah comes true.
Mm-hmm.
So, assuming there is significance to mentioning it that way versus just saying that the wall, which is like natural, normal.
Mm-hmm.
The promise of Allah would then signify it. Which are we being pointed to? Typically, people think that the promise of Allah comes true is like the Day of Judgment.
Mm-hmm.
But over here, if it's before that time, what would promise of Allah's significance be here?
It could mean that at some point of history, let's say, so I have a theory, it could have been any of those major incursions like the Mongols, for example, because they invaded the whole earth as it was known at the time, right? Like at least they covered the entire Far East, Middle East, all of that. It became like a wave and they invaded this whole land. So it could have been that incident. Because I think what you're trying to say is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions of a promise, there has to be some big event that happens. If it's not the Day of Judgment, it has to be something else. What is it? So I'm saying it could have been the incursion of the Mongols and invading that whole area, like from the Far East all the way coming to Iraq, Syria. They stopped at Egypt. I don't think they went into Egypt, but they invaded and occupied that whole area.
And is it there in any of the translations of tafsirs that the Ya'juj and Ma'juj are forever like on the other side of the wall, and when the wall breaks, that's only when they can come in for the end of the days, when they're going to come in and...
No, not necessarily, because again, remember, the reason why the wall was built was because it was a request from only certain people who felt threatened by Ya'juj and Ma'juj. So those people could have been like a small number of people who could not defend themselves against Ya'juj and Ma'juj. But you can understand there's not a single wall that can block an entire population because they can go around. I mean, they can go somewhere else. So it seems like only those people. It could have been a village, it could have been a town, it could have been even a bigger city. But obviously, everybody understands if you build a wall between two mountains, you're not going to defend the entire population of Earth. You're only defending or protecting the people behind that wall or in front of it, depends where you
That's why it sounds like, I mean, it could be symbolic, like not an actual wall where you can, try to solve the problem. But it could be symbolic in the sense that they are actually living now, right? Isn't it?
Correct, yeah. So the opinion I take is that let's assume the wall crumbled already and there was a major event that took place in history, and we can maybe pinpoint to certain big events in history that symbolizes that, right? So after that, those people would have dispersed. And then on the Day of Judgment, or before the Day of Judgment, as a sign, as a major sign, they will assemble again. How, we don't know. And again, some scholars mentioned that Ya'juj and Ma'juj do not have to be a particular ethnicity. So at that time, it could have been the Mongols, for example. And those actually are mentioned in the hadith, that there will be a major invasion happening in that region. And the Prophet ﷺ did not refer to them as Maghul necessarily. In some hadith, he mentioned the Turks, because they're from the same progeny. They're not exactly the same ethnicity. But again, in the future, it could be also a mix of other ethnicities. Because what is common between them is not the ethnicity, it's how they behave. So Ya'juj and Ma'juj, at least the way I understand it, is how they behave, not a specific ethnicity. And then some people think, oh, then they must be giant or they must be zombies. No, it's how they behave, how they act, what makes them like different.
So it doesn't have to be two people or the same two people to show up again later on, nothing like that.
Yeah, because Ya'juj and Ma'juj are referring to two, like say, tribes or two. It's not two people anyway, yeah. Yes.
So, two things. One, I read that the Ya'juj and Ma'juj were wrongly identified as the Gog and Magog from the Bible.
Okay.
And then, kind of like as a separate part of that is, Ibn Kathir thought they were tribes north of the Black Sea. So.
Okay. I'd like to see the reference you use, especially the second one. He might have mentioned something like that. I didn't want to go to all the details, but I can tell you what he says here. But again, this is the abridged copy. I can also get the original. I have it home and also check it. But let me see what you have first. I don't see a specific reference to the Black Sea. You said the Black Sea? Yeah, I don't see a reference here. But what he said quickly as you look for it, he says these two mountains, they have in between, they have a thughra, it's like an opening, a gap. يَخْرُجُ مِنْهَا يَأْجُوجُ مَأْجُوجُ. So Ya'juj and Ma'juj come out of that opening. عَلَى بِلَادِ التُّرْك, to the land of the Turks. Now you could say that since Turkey is, at least has a shore on the Black Sea, okay, but I don't see that he specifies or mentions the Black Sea in here at least. But go ahead, tell me what you have.
It's one of the footnotes in here.
Okay.
It says,
And I'm sorry, what book do you have? What is it? Let me see. The meaning of the Holy Quran, okay. Yahya Emerick, of course, yes, okay. This is an interesting guy. And this in the footnotes?
Yeah, it's in one of them here. I can't remember.
Okay,
which
Ibn
one it
Kathir
is.
was also of the opinion that the Ya'juj and Ma'juj were tribes from somewhere north of the Black Sea. Unfortunately, many modern translators identify Ya'juj and Ma'juj with the biblical Gog and Magog, though the two have nothing to do with each other. As the Gog and Magog of the Bible are described quite differently and serve a different purpose in biblical theology than Ya'juj and Ma'juj of the Quran. Okay, I mean, it's his opinion. Fine. By the way, even if the Quran and the Bible are referring to the same tribes, it doesn't mean that they're going to be identical, right? Meaning, Sometimes the Bible might mention some details that the Quran does not mention, and vice versa. Also, sometimes we believe the Quran is true, so it might correct the information that might have been in the Bible. So just because they're not described exactly the same in the Bible and the Quran, it does not mean that they're totally different tribes. I would, say the default position is that they're the same until we prove otherwise. If there's a good some good evidence that they're different, fine. It's not a big deal, by the way. Whether they're the same or not, it's not a big deal. But usually, these are things that don't happen too many times in history, and the names are so like the names are they sound alike, right? They seem to be similar, and a lot of the description is similar. So we have no reason to believe that they're different, unless again we're able to prove it. Allah knows best. Okay, I think it's time for Isha, so our time is over. Jazakumullah khair, barakallahu fikum. Hope this was helpful, and we'll see you next time. Assalamu alaikum.